Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar on the fascinating two countries down in Southeast Asia, Laos and Cambodia. My name's Jonny Bealby. I founded Wild Frontiers. And can I just say thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today at the slightly unusual time of 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At least that's what it is in the UK. The reason for this, the change, we normally do it at 6 o'clock. Those of you that regulars on these webinars will know, is because one of our speakers is out in Southeast Asia. Now, it was going to be that Mark Steadman, who's going to be talking about Laos, was in his home country of Laos, but he's not, he's in Portsmouth. And Nathan Drain, who was going to be in London, is not in London, he's actually in Thailand. So it all worked out, if for slightly different reasons than what we had first imagined. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining. As I say, we will be back to the 6 o'clock slot from here on. But as I say, this is just because poor old Nathan would have been talking at 2 o'clock in the morning had we stuck with the original time. So, as I say, my name's Jonny Bealby. I founded Wild Frontiers, and let me just explain a little bit about how this evening is going to listen to me, I'm stuck in the old days as well. Let me just say how this afternoon is going to go. So first of all, I'm going to tell you a little bit about setting up Wild Frontiers, my story with this particular part of the world. Then I'm going to hand over to Mark Steadman, who's going to talk about the country that he's made his home, which is Laos. And then we'll hand over to Nathan Drain, who will talk about Cambodia. After that, I'll mention a few other things before we have a question and answer session. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens, and we will try to get round to answering as many of those questions as we can. We will be recording this webinar, so if you have to go away or you want to share it with friends, then we'll send an email tomorrow with a link to the webinar, so you'll be able to do that. Right, so let's crack on without further ado. And in order to do that, I'm going to share my screen. So, yes, as I say, I'm Jonny Bealby. And apologies if you watch lots of these webinars because you'll be getting bored of this part of the story. But anyway, for those of you that haven't watched our webinars before, I founded Wild Frontiers after a decade of travels in the 1990s. I drove a motorbike right the way around Africa, from London to Cape Town and back again. I walked through parts of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and I rode a horse along the Silk Road from Kashgar to the Caspian Sea. This gave rise to 3 travel books: Running with the Moon, about the motorcycle journey; For a Pagan Song, about the walk through India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan; and Silk Dreams, Troubled Road, about the horse riding journey. But perhaps more poignantly or pertinently, than the travel books, it also gave rise to Wild Frontiers. I was given the idea of setting up the company while I was researching my second book out in northern Pakistan, and we started running trips in 1998 to Pakistan, which means that next year will be our 25th anniversary. Interestingly, one of the first countries we started to run trips to outside of kind of South Asia, if you like, was Cambodia. We started running trips there, I think, in about 2003, and have been running trips there ever since. And it is a very, very special country. I didn't get out there until 2008 when I traveled to Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. But since then, I've been back to Cambodia 3 or 4 times. And why? Well, because I absolutely love it. I've been to over 100 countries, and people always ask me, what's your favorite country? And I always say, well, that's an impossible question to answer because everywhere has something special. But there's no doubt that there are probably 10 countries that have really left the mark on me, and Cambodia is definitely one of them. On a recent trip, you know, I did a number of different things, and I think this is one of the great things about Cambodia. It's really got so much to offer. Of course, it's got incredible history dating back thousands of years, as well as more modern history. But it's really got quite a developed tourist infrastructure now, where you can do all sorts of extraordinary things, from bicycling around Angkor Wat, microlighting over Angkor Wat, going down to the coast to Kep Sumer, where there's some fantastic Corbusier architecture, which I've stayed in, Eating the local street food, which of course is delicious, which doesn't have to be deep fried tarantula or deep fried scorpions, is what I was sampling there. And probably one of the best experiences I've had was when I was traveling there with my wife a few years ago. We did a temple safari, and that's a really lovely high-end experience where you go walking through the jungle with a couple of guides for a few kilometers, and then you arrive at one of the ancient temples all on your own, and they've set up an amazing luxury tented camp for you, both a double bed and lovely tent and table and chairs where they produce a great meal, and you watch the sun go down and you're all on your own. Absolutely fabulous. And as a result of the experiences that the longevity that we've been running trips to Cambodia, we also had an office in Cambodia. We had to kind of mothball most of it during COVID, but some of the team here still work on our operations department, and that's why we can produce some really extraordinary experiences that other people would struggle to deliver. So that's Cambodia. As far as Laos is concerned, I haven't been to Laos as much as I've been to Cambodia. I did go there in 2008 and absolutely loved it. I traveled from Luang Prabang, which is a beautiful UNESCO World Heritage town. And the lovely waterfalls nearby. I traveled down through Vang Vieng and Vientiane, and then took a flight down to Pak Se, down on the 4,000 islands. And it's just a really, really wonderful country. A little expression, they say in this part of the world that the Vietnamese plant the rice, the Cambodians tend the rice, and the Laotians listen to the rice grow. And that for me kind of sums up Laos. It was incredibly laid back, very beautiful. And this whole part of the world is just, it is just incredibly evocative. It has an amazing climate, it has beautiful culture, it has great history, it has wonderful cuisine, and it has, as I say, a pretty developed tourist infrastructure which can deliver some of the finest hotels you're ever likely to stay in anywhere. I loved my trip there. I don't want to steal any of the thunder of, or too much of the thunder of Nathan and Mark, so I won't go on too much about it. But it's a fabulous part of the world, and I look forward to going back as soon as I can. So one thing I like to kind of cross off on these webinars, because we always get questions about it, as far as the COVID rates are concerned, I checked today and yesterday there were 102 cases confirmed in Cambodia and 380 in Laos. They've both done very well, these countries, in terms of COVID. Cambodia particularly has got the second highest vaccination rate in the whole region, second only to Singapore, with 82% of the population now double vaccinated. Both countries are open to a degree. Cambodia is fully open. Laos is getting there slowly. Some testing and restrictions may apply. What we're talking about here is really looking at sending people out there from the summer onwards. It's not really viable. It's getting too late in the season now to kind of get people out there before March. So what we're really looking at is either summer trips or autumn trips, which will be the main season to get out there. And if you do, you will probably be seeing Angkor Wat with very, very few tourists, which really is one of the great attractions of the world. But I think the other point I quickly want to make before I pass on is that both of these countries are now really standalone tourist destinations. Of course, it's they produce great combo trips. You can go to Laos and Cambodia on the same trip. And indeed, if you've got a bit longer, you can even throw in Vietnam. But if you really want to jump away from the kind of highlight trip and do a trip that really gets you beneath the surface, then there is plenty to be done on a 2-week trip in both Laos and Cambodia. And I'll mention an itinerary that we do at the end of each of our speakers. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. So before he was 5, Mark's adventurous parents had swapped the crowded streets for South London for the sandy beaches of South Australia. By the time he was 6, he'd been lost in the outback, hauled up Ayers Rock and cruised back to the UK, his first global navigation complete and a thirst for adventure ignited. Later in life, an equal passion for all things rock and roll led to a successful career in the UK music industry. But it was in the early 2000s, after a Central American adventure, which took him from a 6,000-meter Andean peak to a 42-meter deep blue hole, he realized the call of the road had become louder than an AC/DC anthem and swapped his Soho desk for a rucksack and began leading adventure tours. Mark joined Wild Frontiers in 2010 and has led tours for us through some of the world's most exciting destinations, such as Iran, Syria, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Laos, and Burma. We're delighted to say that Mark was crowned Guide of the Year in 2015 in the Wanderlust World Guide Awards, confirming what we always knew, that he is the best in the biz. When Mark isn't tour leading, he resides in Laos, where he runs the Lone Buffalo Foundation. But I will let Mark explain a little bit more about that. Mark, over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Right, thanks, Johnny. I don't know if I can follow that. That's some introduction. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. Or as we like to say in Lao, Sabadi, which is the generic greeting, which I'm always convinced was designed to be said with a smile. It always brings a smile to your face when we greet someone and say Sabadi, as you can see. So delighted that Johnny Wild Frontiers have invited me to talk about the magical place, Lao, that I now call home. So I'm going to start my share screen now. If you just bear with me. And here we go. Okay, so there is my opening slide. So I've called this presentation Lao, a state of mind, and hopefully by the time I finish, I mean, Johnny's already hinted at why we talk about Lao in terms of our state of mind, but hopefully by the end of the presentation you understand what I mean, and if you decide to visit, then you definitely will. So I'm going to start with a couple of photographs just to try to capture that Lao state of mind, and a couple more there. So just a little bit more about myself and my relationship with Lao. So it's a love affair really that began in 2003. I actually scrawled in my notebook when I was leaving Laos for the first time, although I'm all out of Sabadis, I'm not out of love for this land and its people. And at the time I was unaware of the tragic circumstances that would actually lead me to eventually calling Laos home several years later. So a few years after that backpacking trip, my first trip around Laos, I started to return. Well, at this point, I'd actually moved into the touring as a profession, and I started returning with a couple of groups a year, and my love affair grew. But it was really, I think, in 2009 when the love affair was sealed. As you can see on the left here, during the Southeast Asia Games, I discovered the genius of beer in a bag whilst watching the national football team. Okay, so if I'm serious, it was actually the chap on the right, the sudden death of my local guide, his name was Manapet, in 2010, which actually led me to go back to Laos on a more permanent basis. Manapet was an inspirational man. His nickname was Lone Buffalo. He taught kids for free, taught kids English for free in the evenings, and during the daytime he worked helping to clear the bombs from for the unexploded ordnance programs. So he died suddenly in 2010. I took his nickname, Lone Buffalo, a donation of $5,000, and together with a teacher friend, we opened a free English centre in memory of Manapet in Ponsavan, which is in the northeast of Laos, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So there's a couple of pictures there of me arriving on the overnight bus from Vientiane with the contents of what will become the school on the left in 2011. And on the right, you can see a more recent picture of that's our student development team. I can see there, they just been presenting a youth safeguarding workshop. Actually, they've got their youth aware t-shirts on, which is one of our fabulous initiatives at our project. So living and working in Laos, I spend a lot of time with Lao people, both young and old. And I also have facilitated guide development workshops, as you can see a couple of pictures here, for my Lao colleagues or friends, really. These are all Lao guides that I work with, my colleagues. So yeah, we've done guide workshops, we've done responsible training, responsible tourism training. So I think this, this whole outlook of having both the English project and my guiding background and all my Lao friends and contacts, gives me a really good perspective from which to talk about the country. Okay, so we're going to start with a few facts. Is it Lao or is it Laos? I heard Johnny use both, and I often use both phrases as well. It's really up to you. The French generally are the ones that said Lao. President Nixon famously and incorrectly pronounced it Laos, as he tried to deny the US presence here during the American War. Technically, it's the Lao PDR, which stands for People's Democratic Republic. But veteran expats like myself, we like to refer to the PDR as "Please Don't Rush." Okay, so moving on here. So Laos is also the least densely populated country in Southeast Asia, around 32 people per square kilometre, in a country roughly the size of the UK, just slightly smaller than the UK. Unfortunately, it has the distinction of being the most heavily bombed country on the planet. Per head of population. So the equivalent of around 700 kilograms of ordnance was dropped for every man, woman and child living in Laos between 1964 and 73, which was the 9 years of carpet bombing by the United States. And Laos is also one of the few places where the hammer and sickle still fly. The old Soviet logo is the flag of the ruling Lao People's Revolutionary Party, who have been in control of the country since the revolution in 1975. Okay, so just talk a little bit about the geography. For convenience, we can split Laos into three distinct regions. We've got the north, we've got the central provinces, and we've got the south. And historically, these regions have also been separate states and at various times come under different political or military influence from the Siamese, from the Chinese, the Vietnamese, the Burmese, and the Khmer. So as the regional power balances waxed and waned through history, this eventually led to Laos taking the French protectorate in 1893, which probably guaranteed its survival as a geographical entity instead of being absorbed by its neighbours. So the nice thing about travelling through the country, or for any country really by road, is that you see the transitions, not just the geographical transitions, but the changes in agriculture, the local economy, the ethnic groups and the costumes. In Laos, travelling from north to south, the roads gradually flatten and straighten, the fields get bigger and more mechanised, and whatever light manufacturing we have starts to appear as you travel further south. It's also where the key transit routes to Vietnam and Thailand are at their easiest. And also in the central and more so the south, an abundance of water in the Mekong catchment area means that second rice crops are possible, which gives a feeling that the south is a more prosperous part of the country, which is very true. So typically on a north-south trip in Laos, you will start your adventure either in the capital or maybe in Luang Prabang here. So enjoying the charms of Luang Prabang, one of the highlights of any visit to Laos. And yeah, there's a couple here. There's the Kung Si waterfalls. There's a lovely sunset over the Mekong. There's Tak Bak, which is the arms collection. Nice deserted. That's the main street of Luang Prabang that you see in that top left-hand shot. Okay, so moving on, I'm moving south from Luang Prabang. We're going to wind down through the beautiful mountainous north here. So here the road's very narrow. We have one highway. It's called a highway, which is quite ironic, but one sort of just about double lane road, which actually comes in from China Highway 13, which has been built under the French rule. But yeah, travels Highway 13 runs from the Chinese border all the way down and into Cambodia. But here the road, yeah, in the north, the road will be very narrow, winding ascents and descents. And here's where you'll come across a lot of the ethnic villages. Some of the northern provinces actually will have an 80% plus ethnic population. So as you travel into the center and the south, it becomes more ethnic Lao. So that's the sort of dominant ethnic group, around sort of 60% of the people, but the other 40% is made up of all different ethnic groups who have also come in and moved out from the region. So yeah, so a day's journeying south from Luang Prabang is going to take, you'll see rice fields impossibly balanced on mountainsides, and then the landscape will dramatically flatten as you arrive on a wide plateau which is home to Ponsavan and the famous and fabulous Plain of Jars archaeological sites. But this experience of descending onto the plateau is even more breathtaking if you arrive by air, as you dramatically fly through a gap in the mountains and the plateau and the provincial capital of Ponsavan open out in front of you. And you can actually understand that why during conflicts, times of conflicts, control of this flat area in the generally mountainous north was really strategically important. As you can see on the right, there's still evidence in some of our villages of what happened here during the 9 years of bombing. So here's the recently awarded the status of World Heritage Site. Unfortunately, it came just before COVID came, so we still haven't really had an opportunity up there in Ponsavan, which is where I live, of actually really taking advantage of this new status that we rightfully received a few years ago. So yeah, so generally a stay in Ponsavan is going to involve visiting some of the Jar sites. We actually do a lovely walk between sites 1 and 2, which are the two you can see pictured here. A nice hour over the plain, which gives you a lovely perspective on the sort of surrounding area. So these are 2,000-year-old burial vessels. Burial vessels, a real sort of mystery, really, and yes, still an unsolved mystery despite numerous excavations and expeditions from various universities from around the world. It still has a lovely mystique, and it's fantastic for me to have that, you know, pretty much a stone's throw away from where I reside. Also, other highlights in Ponsavan, we have a great silk farm, a really sort of rustic project where you can learn about all the different process of making silk. You can also learn about the tragic, you know, history of the unexploded ordnance, or UXO as we call it, and obviously a visit to Lone Buffalo can also be included in itineraries should you so wish to come and see what we do there. So you can arrive and leave Ponsavan by air, just a 30-minute hop to the capital, which is a journey that takes 8 hours by road. But for our virtual journey, we're going to wind back up into the mountains and head out of the plateau and head down for the central provinces. So eventually the road does straighten and flatten, and then you come into this fabulous scenery of the central region, Halong Bay on land, it's sometimes called, where beautiful caves are tucked away inside these towering limestone casts. Now, the central provinces are sometimes overlooked in people's haste to get to the south, and I noticed Johnny, when he talked about his trip earlier on, was one of those that flew to Paksay, so he missed all this beauty of the central provinces. And for me, this is one of the most interesting areas of the country. So for the active, the areas around Takek in the central province is great for walking, for trekking, exploring the caves. And for the even more adventurous, you'll find climbing, you'll find zip lining. There's even a new spider's net that's appeared around the Hinboon Stone Forest protected area. This is Cambodia province. We also have sleepy riverside capitals. I love these two places, provincial capitals of Takek and Savannakhet here. Savannakhet is just, oh, it's just such a funky little, beautiful little sort of spot, dead quiet and just dead perfect beside the river. And it's great, you can sit beside the river here with a beer and you can look out over Thailand, where the pace of life is somewhat more frantic. You can see there's the classic beer Laos shop there looking out over sunset over Thailand. And yeah, both of these little towns have great night markets and their own distinct cuisines. I always love to take my clients down there to the river and have a Laos style beer and barbecue duck evening, which is always a lot of fun. So now we're moving on to Khong Lor. So we're still in the central provinces here. So Cam Muon is home to this mighty Khong Lor cave, where unbelievably you can take a near 8-kilometer motorized boat route through this particular cave. You can see in the top left-hand shot the boat, one of these little narrow boats that will have, you know, 2 or 3 of you and a skillful boatman that'll navigate its way through this incredible cave. A really exhilarating experience, which even after 20+ trips will still get me excited. You stop inside the cave and disembark from the boat and walk around these beautiful rock formations that the French have put this lovely lighting system in, and then you re-enter your boat and you continue through the cave. I think there's probably very few places in the world where you can spend 8 kilometers running through a cave in a motorized boat. Great experience. So continuing south from the central regions, the road is flat and straight. Is that I actually say to my clients when we're coming, right, this is going to be the last bend, and it's almost like that from there on in, all the winding and the up and down stops, and you're in the south proper. So we've arrived in the south. Champasak, what can I say? Champasak is one of my favorite spots in Laos, maybe just because it's the place that's experienced the least change since I first visited there in 2003. I mean, it's just lovely. Gorgeous sunrises over the Mekong, a sleepy one-strip town beside the river, absolutely perfect. And there's my bicycle I hired and took a little, this was couple of years ago. I went down for Christmas and just cycled around the rice fields in the early morning sun. Absolutely beautiful. South is also home to the Bolovan Plateau. This is an area to the east which borders Vietnam, another ethnically diverse area. It's the Lavan people where the name gets where the name of the area comes from, and it's dominated by waterfalls, by cave systems. And it's where the majority of the tea and most notably the coffee industry in Laos is situated. You can see here there's one of my group's experiencing the delights of coffee tasting, something I arranged with a little hot coffee house and farmer friends that I know, the coffee collective down there on the plateau. So it's a great day out, Bolovan Plateau. You can do it in a long day out from Champasak. Or you can literally stay on a waterfall here. You can see the last picture is there. There's the accommodation at Tad Lo, which is over the waterfall. Remarkable. And so now we're still in the area around Champasak. Close to the town is one of the 3 World Heritage Sites. So the last one I'm introducing to you, Laos' 3rd World Heritage Site, or the 2nd in terms of the order they came. A spectacular remnant of a time when the Khmer empires of Chenla, Champa, and ultimately Angkor dominated the region. And so now we're moving further south. So further south, it's all about the Mekong River, which hits its widest at the record-breaking Papeng waterfalls, which you can see in the first slide. According to some sources, it's the widest waterfall in the world, certainly the widest in Southeast Asia. And this area is dubbed Sipandon, which translated means 4,000 islands. Most are uninhabited rocky outcrops, but you can stay comfortably on a few of the bigger islands. There's a couple more. In fact, 4,000 Islands was where my Laotian love affair really began. I spent a week there just swinging in a hammock with absolutely nothing to do, but life was simple in those days, in 2003. And those last couple of shots are from that time. So yeah, stunningly beautiful, laid back island feel, great for cycling. And if you're lucky, you might catch the 2 remaining Irrawaddy dolphins that inhabit the river close to the Cambodian border. So that's like a 1,000-kilometer virtual road trip that's taken you from north to south in Laos, hopefully capturing the essence of Laos and that state of mind that I started on. So I'm going to move over to a few practicalities now. So there's one last shot of the south there from 2003, and nothing much has changed since then, I can assure you. Maybe that buffalo is maybe no more. Okay, so when we come to food, clients are actually really surprised by how well they eat in Laos. I mean, I love food, I love to eat. I make sure my clients share that experience. So as well as taking an influence from our neighbors, especially Thailand, which is obviously culturally the closest to Laos, we have some fabulous dishes of our own. So the top left there is lap, which is a wonderful dish which is made with minced meat, or it can be made with fish, or even tofu or mushrooms. I've seen it done. Lime, mint, chili, and traditionally served with a sort of handful of sticky rice to mop up the juices. Papaya salad, as spicy as you can take, tasty curries, stir fries, and of course plenty of the nation's favorite noodle soup you can see on the right there. Fish is always fresh and the vegetables tasty. It's actually a really sort of good place for vegetarians to go. You can eat very well there, meat free. But for the more adventurous, this is the forest platter. So served up especially for my clients by Joy, the chef and owner of one of my favorite restaurants in Luang Prabang. I can see some crickets here, I can see some wasp larvae, and for the vegetarian option, there's some stir-fried fern there over on the far side. All washed down with a couple of glasses of local fire water for that ultimate foodie experience. So where are you going to stay? Accommodation. From rustic to luxury, Luang Prabang will offer something for all tastes, even a Rosewood residence these days. That resort at the top there, I love this place. This is Muang La in the northwest of the country. It has a hot spring that actually runs through the resort. But for many visitors, it's as much about the location as the facilities, waking up in the most rustic of rooms, but in a forest beside a stream with only the sounds of nature to stir you, or maybe me banging on your door telling you it's time to leave. This, yeah, on the left here, we see a lovely spot where you wake up to the sound of the putt-putt of the boat engines. This is on the U River, just a couple 3 hours or so north of Luang Prabang. Great place to wake up. I love this little spot here called Riverside. And on the right is the view of the sunrise from my room in Champasak, which is possibly one of my favorite places I stay anyway. I actually pinched these photos from their website last night because I wanted to share the opulence of this place here, which has 2 infinity pools beside the Mekong, beautiful 2-story bungalows. Yeah, and it's a great place to finish your trip, spend a couple of days here. Yeah, and you certainly won't regret it. So how much time do you need to dedicate to Laos? Well, you really need to travel at Lao pace, experience in the different regions. A couple of weeks would be a really, a really good time to experience the country. And as Johnny hinted at the start, I mean, one positive of the post-COVID world may be that more people actually see Laos now as a single country destination. I mean, statistically, pre-COVID, around 80% of visitors would see Luang Prabang and Vientiane and nowhere else in the country. So there's so much out there to see. So when we finish a trip and I gather my clients, my friends around the table, and we start to reminisce about our highlights, it's rare there's an obvious winner, and it may surprise some that it's also very unusual that Luang Prabang gets mentioned in that little roundup, more than just a passing reference. And that's no way a slight on the lovely UNESCO World Heritage Town. It's just simply that Laos has so much else to offer as well. Your highlights could be floating upside down on your back in a life vest 200 meters inside a cave, staring up at the amazing rock formations in the central provinces. This incredible experience that very few places you can do something like this the day after zooming through the Konglor cave on those little motorized boats. It might be learning about the humbling work of the unexploded ordnance teams, as you can see here in Pond Savannah, or even visiting our wonderful students at Lone Buffalo. Your highlight may be watching the sunrise over the Mekong from the top of an ancient mountain temple with a UNESCO World Heritage Site to yourselves, courtesy of a special arrangement we have with the Guardian and the key holder. Or just learning about traditions, I mean, really getting a feel for the country by getting your shoes off and getting there in a paddy field, planting some rice, or even having a go behind the buffalo, or helping rake out the corn there as Trevor is doing in that last shot. Handing over a crate of beer to Lao ladies celebrating Lao Women's Day. That's Eric there. Or waking up in a mountain village devoid of any Western comforts, and then managing that smile when the fresh Lao coffee magically appears. Okay, so personally, I love the contrasts which grow and widen as the country develops. So the new Chinese railway on the left there is a really good example of that, which speeds its way at over 100 kilometers an hour between Luang Prabang and the capital in Vientiane, where at the same time, somewhere in the countryside, you can still turn back the clock and see and find scenes like you see there on the right that have changed little in centuries, and where the railway is just something they hear about on the daily broadcast, the daily party broadcasts that sort of sounds out through the speaker systems of the villages in the remote areas. These capsules of the past alongside the present and the future is really what sort of kept me in Laos. And there you go. So for most, the highlight really is that whole Lao experience, just being in Laos, slowing down to the Lao pace of life, and it doesn't matter way of thinking. Bo Pen Yang is the phrase that we use. You'll hear that almost as often as you'll hear Sabadi. And say that Lao state of mind that and I've been describing. In fact, one of my travelers wrote to me explaining how she was suffering from something called Laolessness after she returned to the UK. I mean, those that visit Laos will understand this condition and know that the only real cure is to return for another trip. And I really hope that in the future, I can introduce some of you there, to this Lao state of mind. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Mark, do you want to stop sharing your screen for a second? That would be great. Lovely. Mark, thank you so much. That is just so fascinating. And what really comes across in your talk is people doing real travel. You know, the pictures you've shown there of people really enjoying real life in Laos. And I think that's just, yeah, that's so refreshing. It just takes me back to, you know, when we started Wild Frontiers, and the reason why we started Wild Frontiers was to give people those kind of experiences. So thank you so much, Mark. Fascinating. I apologize for not going overland through the central region, but I have something to look forward to now. So without further ado, let me share my screen again, and we can move on to, oh yeah, I just want to mention this. Mark talked us through a journey right the way through Laos. And obviously we have a tour that does exactly that, which Mark leads, called Laos Unlocked. It goes generally October and February. We've actually literally today just put on a second departure in October because the other October departure is pretty much full. I think there are 2 places left. So we've put on a new departure today. So that's going in October, and then there's another departure in the kind of early spring, February for next year. So this is the trip that Mark takes. And if you want to be one of those people enjoying that real life of travel, then that's the way to do it. Right, so let's move on to Nathan and Cambodia. Nathan's interest in travel started with a 19-month trip taking in Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. Trekking to Everest Base Camp opened his eyes to the travel industry, and upon returning to the UK, and perhaps to justify why he'd been away so long, he decided it was the industry for him. After 5 years cutting his teeth as an Asia specialist with other companies, he joined Wild Frontiers in 2016 and now heads our Southeast Asia department. So Nathan, are you there from Thailand?
Yes, I am indeed, Johnny.
Hey, very good. Okay.
Thank you for the lovely introduction. Cool. Well, as Johnny mentioned, I'm currently based in Southeast Asia, somewhere that I was very fortunate to call home for a number of years. Johnny mentioned just on the Lao Unlocked tour, I know there's a few people who will be tuning in who are going to be going on there who I'm looking after. And there's currently 1 spot left on the 23rd of October, but we have opened up one at the start of October as well. But without further ado, let me get to share with you a country that I know and love very well, and that's Cambodia. So the first thing to mention, and as Johnny alluded to, Cambodia is open. It's the only country in Southeast Asia that doesn't have any requirement for you to quarantine for a day on arrival or to jump through numerous hoops. It's actually somewhere that you can go now and enjoy. This photo was actually taken by Nala, who was in the picture that Johnny just showed to the left of me. who, despite missing hosting people and helping all our travelers explore Siem Reap, has enjoyed lockdown with the temple complexes basically to himself. And it's been slightly painful watching his Instagram, but his photos are amazing, and you'll see a few of them as we kind of go through it. So Jonny briefly mentioned myself, and here's a little bit about me. So this picture is from my first ever trip to Cambodia, and is in the Ratanakiri province, which is in the northeast. And we were doing a trek along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And good as gold, the amazing Cambodian people, even in the furthest remote parts, can still deliver an Englishman a cup of tea in the morning. I've worked for Wild Frontiers for just over 6 years now, and I'm fortunate to be a Condé Nast travel expert for Southeast Asia, as well as being on the Wendy Perrin Wow list. So I mentioned him briefly, and you can see him there to the right, riding his bike. But one of the main things that makes Southeast Asia, as Mark alluded to, is the people, and Cambodia is absolutely no different. Everybody there is available to welcome you with a greeting smile and show amazing hospitality, and our team is fantastic. To the left, you can see Makara, who has the fortune to be the inaugural Mr. Siem Reap, a beauty pageant for men, and they never held it again. So technically, he still holds the title, although he hates it if people refer to him as that. And in the centre is just a shot of our team on a boat journey on Tonle Sap, a famous lake that sits between Siem Reap and Phnom Penh. And the care and attention that our team put into the trips really do make it come to life, as well as part of Wild Frontiers, which is helping people experience the country, but also make connections with people. And they really do that. From when you turn up, if you're in Siem Reap, one of Makara or Nala will take you out and take you walking through the street food areas, and really make you feel at home immediately. It's such a beautiful country and an amazing place to start. That being said, and a little bit to what Mark alluded to, there is so much more to Cambodia than just Siem Reap. And unfortunately, 80+% of people who go to Cambodia only visit the famous temple complexes and spend 3 to 4 days there. And as we're coming out of this COVID world, hopefully people will recognize that it is more of a destination for 2 weeks as opposed to 4 days. And it's been my goal since I joined Wild Frontiers over 6 years ago to get people to at least commit to one more destination or move a few more inches on the map to try and experience something different. So going anti-clockwise, just so you can kind of get an idea of the areas, you've got Battambang here, famous for its bamboo railway and a real expat kind of hangout for people who don't want to be in Siem Reap. To the south of that, you've got the Cardamom Mountains, which I'm going to be touching upon. Further down, you've got the beaches. Sihanoukville used to be the main one, but unfortunately, it's been a little bit overdeveloped. So we tend to make sure clients go to the islands, which are still truly beautiful. Slightly to the east of that, you've got Kampop and Kep, which have a beautiful traditional French colonial architecture, some of the best seafood you'll ever get. And then heading further along, you get to Phnom Penh, the capital city. This is it's a beautiful city with some amazing French colonial architecture, and you can do some wonderful tours. We can have a specialist take you around and teach you about the history of the buildings. You can do street food tours, you can do cooking classes, but typically the reason that people head to Phnom Penh is to learn more about the recent darker history of Cambodia, and that ties in with the Khmer Rouge. So the two kind of main places you will visit when in the region or when you're in Phnom Penh is a Tul Seng Museum, also known as S21, and it's quite a harrowing experience visiting them. But I do believe it's something that if you are going to spend time in Cambodia, that you really need to see in order to appreciate the amazing people and how they've managed to bounce back from this recent travesty. And this was a school that was turned into a prison slash torture kind of center. And then you have the killing fields, which again, a very harrowing experience, but something that if you really want to understand Cambodia, then it is kind of a must-do on the list. I do try to include it at the start of the trip because nobody really wants that before they kind of fly home. And the last time I was in the killing fields, a snake fell out the tree very close to me, which was another shocker as kind of part of it. Moving on, somewhere that I briefly mentioned, which is the Cardamom Mountains. Now, I probably know what you're all thinking, that it doesn't look very mountainous, but because Cambodia is mostly a delta region with a large lake in it, this is kind of as mountainous as it gets. And it is a beautiful reserve, one of the last homes to the Asian elephant, the clouded leopard, amongst a variety of wildlife that still exists in this beautiful part of Cambodia. And it's only 2.5 hours, dependent on Phnom Penh traffic away, and an amazing place to visit with some amazing accommodation. So one of the places that you can stay is the Canvas and Orchid Retreat, formerly known as the Four Rivers. Johnny's stayed here as well, and it's such an amazing place. You literally leave from a tiny pier, go up the estuary, and you round a bend, and suddenly greeting you is these amazing safari tents, just seemingly in the middle of nowhere, as you've just been kind of going up and up this river. I was very fortunate to take my mum here, and I hadn't kind of alluded to where we were going. She hadn't seen the itinerary or anything, and her mind was just blown that some place like this could exist. And you can do some amazing trekking in the forest. You can go to some waterfalls. You can do kayaking. Bizarrely, the water's either going to be seawater or fresh water, depending on how the tide is. And yeah, a remarkable place to stay. If you're more focused on conservation, then the Cardamom Tenter Camps is an amazing place to stay as well. The tents are beautiful and well constructed. It just doesn't have that kind of river bend area, but you do get to go out with the park rangers, and they'll take you to the various posting stations in the forest, and you get a real idea of what they're trying to protect and why they're out there. And every night you stay contributes largely to the upkeep of this amazing part of Cambodia. Now, moving on to the far east of Cambodia is Mondulkiri, and the main town of Sen Monoram. And this is the kind of, well, it is the best hotel that you can stay on in the area. So you can see the fantastic pool, and the really nice kind of areas that you can sit out and enjoy being in the true kind of Cambodian countryside. And if you look really closely to the picture above the writing, you'll see someone on a zip line, because they have set up a New Zealand company set up an amazing zip line through this area. And even though I mentioned her before and how much she loved the Four Rivers Retreat, my mum's favourite story is how in her mid-60s, she managed to do a zip line across a 20-metre canyon. What she doesn't tell everyone is she had her eyes closed the whole way, and I had to move a small Cambodian person who was due to catch her out the way so that I would take the impact. Fortunately, I played rugby, but it was still a decent back. The main draw of Mondulkiri is in fact the amazing Elephant Valley project, established in 2006 with the moniker of Let Them Roam Free. And truly, this is one of the first elephant projects that you could say was truly responsible travel. And it is so amazing to go there and you just experience them in their natural habitat and surroundings. And they've basically rescued these elephants from various situations, be them logging companies, and brought them so they can enjoy a second lease of life. For instance, Ruby in the bottom left-hand corner, she's a really funny story. She's a small elephant that was part of a logging crew with a lot of bull elephants. And she seemed to, I guess because there's no mirrors in Cambodia, she didn't really understand that she wasn't one of the bull elephants. And although she's one of the smaller members of the herd, she's the guardian of them. So she'll always make sure she stands between the tourists and the rest of the herd, before she kind of relaxes and lets people approach them. And you do get to kind of, it's more a case of just watching them as they move through the forest, and you can take photos and just enjoy them. And it, like, going there really helps keep them moving this project on. And it's, for animal lovers, it's a truly wonderful experience. Moving on and keeping the kind of conservation idea, heading to Kratie. Like Mark mentioned, there's only a couple of river waddy dolphins up in the up near Paksay in the south of Laos, and fortunately Kratie has a larger number with several pods in the area. You can see one of them in the bottom left-hand corner, and that it's breaching is what you really get to see from them. They're not bottlenose dolphins. You're not going to see them balancing on their tails or doing tricks, but it's still a very rare animal to see. And heading to Kratie is one of the few regions where you'll have a phenomenal chance of seeing them. It also gives the opportunity to head to Koh Trong, which is a small island that has one little dirt track going around it. Then you jump on the side carts of a bike, and you head to this lovely resort called Surya Bori Villas, which is traditional Khmer housing, where it's raised on stilts in order to allow the hot air to rise and the cool air to circulate. And they are beautiful accommodation, and definitely worth a stop if you're in Cambodia. And as I mentioned briefly, there is Battambang, which has the famous bamboo train. There's a picture of my wife and I a number of years ago enjoying it. What they don't tell you when you get on the train is that if another one's coming the other way, you'll have to help them lift the train off the platform in order to let them go. Otherwise, you have a standoff just waiting to see who will move. In the middle is a picture of Preah Vihear, which is a temple complex to the north of Thailand. To the north of Cambodia and the south of Thailand, and there's been a lot of dispute as to who has the rights to it. But currently it's in Cambodian hands and is an amazing place to visit. And to the right, you see the mass bat exodus, which again is something that Battambang is famous for. And I would be remiss to talk about Cambodia without talking about the famous temples of Angkor Wat. Now this again, as I mentioned, Nala, who kind of heads up our team over in Siem Reap. This is another one of his photos. Normally, if you were here in kind of the peak time, you would see a procession of people with umbrellas heading down towards the main thing. But he's only, you can see a few children playing in the foreground. And genuinely, if we can get you out to Cambodia sooner rather than later, you might have the opportunity of enjoying these complexes almost to yourself. It's the largest religious monument in the world if you count it as a complex, something around 40 hectares. So lots to explore and do in your time there. Here's a couple of the famous, well, the most so famous temples. Ta Prohm, which was reclaimed by the jungle, and then subsequently through conservation efforts, we've managed to kind of gain some of it back, but leave it as a testimony to how the people initially discovered these temples and what they look like. You've got the Bayon temples with the famous faces, and just a picture to the top right to show the amazing Buddhist monks who frequent the temples, walking around continuously in their amazing orange robes. And they really do add a photographic opportunity to everything, because they just stand out so differently from the temples and all the vegetation and everything around. And as I mentioned, to avoid the umbrella brigade, we try and ensure that when people are in Siem Reap, that they experience the temples differently. Now, my favorite way of doing it is our kind of hidden temple cycling trip. So you jump on your bikes and you head along the city walls, and you take all the small little back roads that tour groups can't go down, and you approach all the temples from different angles to most people. And often, because you're traveling much further using the bikes, you can get to different areas at different times of the day. So as you're returning, they're going further out, and you kind of lap around them so that you get the temples when fewer other people are there. And it is an amazing way to experience the temples. Even for those who don't like cycling, we can do other tours where it's walking tours where we focus on certain areas. You get dropped in different areas at the start of the day so that you experience them before people reach them. And it truly makes a very different experience to what I first had when I headed there 18 years ago, and just kind of followed the crowd around with an ancient history degree, thinking I would know everything about the temples, and knew very little until a guide showed me the different ways to experience it. And for families, we do an amazing thing, which is a scavenger hunt around the temples. So the little ones get given different instructions of things to find, what to look for, to mark off on their book as they go around, allowing for the guide to explain to the parents what they're experiencing, what they're seeing, the history of the region. But you'll be surprised at how many times the parents want to get involved in the scavenger hunt as opposed to learning the histories of the temples. Now, as I said, there is a lot more to Cambodia than just the temple complexes of Angkor Wat. There is actually a lot more to see and reap than just the temples, which are one of the wonders of the world and a must see. But you can again, you can head to Prek Tol and see the floating villages. A lovely way to do this is as part of a kayaking tour, where you kayak in and amongst the floating villages, and they always smile at people because it's just not the conventional way of visiting. You can do a Tonle Sap cruise, be that a sunset cruise, which is a phenomenal way of enjoying a sundowner drink, and Tonle Sap being again the main lake that connects Phnom Penh and Siem Reap. And you can actually, if you wanted to do, you can do overnight cruising between them to save on journeying time around. You can cycle through the Cambodian countryside. We can do cooking classes with families, or living the way of the life of a Cambodian family, where you journey out in the morning, you stay with the family, your kids play with their kids, and a really immersive thing. If you're into bird watching, then at Prek Tol, you can look for the Saurus crane, quite famous on people's lists of things to do. You can do a street food tour. If you're really interested in photography, we can do a private photography tour with a top photographer, showing you the different lighting and things you can see in and amongst the temples, as well as the countryside. Or you can do kind of a sunset tour on an Angkor Moat. So the top left is the Angkor Moat, you can see at sunset. And then below that is the kayaking. Those people are kind of leisurely at it at the moment, but it does get a lot more fun. The right-hand corner, you can see a more traditional paddy fields that you have on the outskirts of Siem Reap. And the top right-hand corner is something that I think everybody should visit when they go to Siem Reap, and that's the Far Circus, which was set up by 9 refugees. Well, they set it up in Battambang. There were 9 refugees in 1994 who travelled back, and they found arts as a means of getting over what they'd experienced. And then they started offering free lessons to street children in Battambang, teaching them the arts. And as they progressed, a lot of them focused on the aerobatics, which kind of come natural with the Thai physique. And you can actually go and see this amazing production. And I tried to time it for your final night in Siem Reap. And the show typically tells Khmer stories through humor and through amazing acrobatic stunts. And it is something to truly behold. And yeah, we can do a lovely evening meal afterwards. But the show has been so popular and the people so amazing that even a couple of the children managed to progress to being in Cirque du Soleil. So a wonderful show, and something that you should all experience if you do go to Siem Reap. And it would be remiss of myself talking about Southeast Asia not to mention some beach options. So I touched briefly on Koh Rong in the south, and there's some amazing resorts and boutique hotels that you can stay on there. For those looking for a little bit more luxury, there's the stunning Songsa Resort, or a Six Senses Koh Krabi. If you don't need the white sand, then an amazing place to visit is Kep, which has fantastic seafood, amazing French colonial architecture, is next to Kampot, famous for the Kampot peppers, And my favorite resort is Nai Bang Chat, which has an amazing relaxed and experience about it. So overall, just to kind of summarize, if you are going and you only have time for Siem Reap, then I truly understand it, because it's an amazing place to stay and everyone's drawn to the to one of the wonders of the world. But really, if you can commit a bit more time, it makes so much more difference to understanding the region, the people, and yeah, it's a truly wonderful destination, and one that I hope you can all travel to fairly soon.
Nathan, thank you so much. Again, just I'm sitting here in Oxfordshire and I'm salivating once more about travel and getting traveling again and going to these wonderful places. I'm lucky that I've been to Cambodia a few times. And the last time I was there, as you know, I did do quite a nice journey through, and the floating tented camp, Four Rivers is one of the best places I've ever stayed. And what's really nice is a lovely routing that I did that kind of took us out via Kep, and we stayed in Kanai Bang Chat, which was fascinating. Ate a lot of crab, for those of you that like crab, and then moved our way through the Four Rivers and then out into Thailand to get back down to Bangkok to fly home, which worked really well. Really nice routing. So again, I'm just going to quickly share my screen just to finish off Nathan's talk there. This is our Cambodia Explorer Tour. We do departures in February, October, and November. Takes in pretty much most of what Nathan was talking about there. And as we were talking with Laos Unlocked with Mark and Cambodia Explorer, these are two kind of in-depth tours that really get you beneath the surface of the country and show you really right the way around each place. But if you haven't got time and you want to stick more to the highlights, we do of course get you off the beaten track a little bit as well. Then we have this tour, which is the Heart of Indochina, which covers Laos and Cambodia. You do fly down across the central region to Pak Se, do the 4,000 islands, and then come overland through Stung Treng to Kratie, and then down to Phnom Penh up to Siem Reap. So you cover the kind of the 4,000 islands, which of course are, you know, more off the beaten track, but you also get the highlights. So that's a tour that travels November, December, and Jan. So you could spend next Christmas on this particular trip. I think one of the things that's really become so obvious through this, I was thinking about it as both you, Mark, and Nathan were talking. We tend to think of these countries in terms of the architecture, the history, the landscapes, the cuisine, all those, the architecture, all those things that kind of visually make these countries so special. But what really makes this whole part of the world so special, and I know it's going to sound like a cliche, but it is the people. The people really make you feel so welcome. It's a place, I mean, what is Thailand's motto? Land of 1,000 smiles or something, isn't it? I mean, it is literally that. And that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. You feel so relaxed here. So quickly, before we move on to questions, I know we're running over slightly, as usual, sorry. Other destinations that are trending at the moment, which are all places one can go to very easily. Uzbekistan, Georgia and the Caucasus, the Middle East is doing really well at the moment, particularly Oman and Jordan. And our Western Europe trips are doing really well. Italy, walking and wine in the Apennines, walking and wine in the Pyrenees in Spain. We've had trips in Portugal, walking with bears in Poland and Slovakia, Romania, Montenegro. You know, these are all places where the COVID rules are relaxing rapidly as we speak. So we're seeing France and Italy this week saying no more testing to come into the country. That's going to start rolling on through all the other European countries and hopefully more worldwide as the year progresses. Do check out wildfrontiers.tv. We have a lot of wonderful videos there. You can see here, walking in the Apennines, if you fancy that. Have a look at the videos there. If you'd like to do a Zoom consultation and you would like to talk about booking a holiday to Laos or Cambodia or anywhere else, please get in touch. You can see Nathan there, top right. He will be happy to talk you through the options. Wild Frontiers Foundation, as most of you know, before COVID, we did all these in a fixed location, usually in Paddington, but sometime in London, but also at the Royal Geographical Society, where money from the entrance fee went to the foundation. Obviously, we can't do that anymore, but if you felt like giving a donation to one of our projects, such as the school in Pakistan, or indeed Lone Buffalo, which we also support, then do please go to that address, or Just Giving Wild Frontiers, and make a small donation. That would be great. We still have reduced deposits on group tours of £200 or $250, 20% on tailor-made adventures, and we still have our COVID promise, which means that if a trip isn't viable, you are due a full refund or a free transfer. The group tours, maximum group size is 12. We have the tour leaders and local guides, interesting and comfortable accommodation and transport, full board, so almost all meals are included, COVID health and safety policy, and tailor-made, a full team of travel specialists, expert knowledge in their area, and of course, we are ATOL protected. So let me stop sharing my screen and let's go to a couple of questions. Nathan, I thought I will actually ask one, first of all, of you. Mark, if you want to put your video on as well, because I've got a couple of questions here for you. Nathan, you are in Thailand, Phuket, I believe. You've experienced what they call the sandbox entry requirements or something like that. I thought our viewers might find it interesting to know what you had to do to get into Thailand and what the kind of rules are there at the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, it was actually fairly straightforward once you've done the paperwork, because that is always the case with traveling at the moment. So upon arrival, they had a very efficient, as Thailand always would have, testing center. So as you leave, you check out, like you leave the airport as you would normally would with all the checks, but then they have a set thing where you present them with your testing. You then go to a booth, you get tested, then you get transported privately to your hotel that you've had to book in advance, and you wait in your room until you get the result. Fingers crossed it's negative. It was. That came within about 6 or 7 hours. And from that point, you're allowed to actually travel around, so long as you have a second test booked in an official kind of testing center. And then that's on day 5. So between your first negative and the other, you are free to travel around. And then you go and do the second test. So long as that is negative, again, within 6 or 7 hours, you're then released into Thailand. So all fairly straightforward.
Sorry, does the second test have to be at the same place as the first test? So in other words, you have to stay in the place you are?
Not anymore. They're referring to it as test and go. So you have to still do the 2 tests, but you could do the first one, for instance, in Bangkok, and then stay there for a couple of nights. Then you could travel up to Chiang Mai, so long as you have the testing place booked and a hotel booked that is under the testing regulations, and then you would be fine. So they've actually reduced it now so that you can move to certain areas, but also you can still stay into provincial. So even if you flew into Phuket or wanted to go to one of the islands in Phuket province, you could do that so long as you had the test officially booked. So
yeah, I mean, it's all quite important because, of course, talking about Laos and Cambodia, and there we go, I'm calling it Laos, is that Bangkok, of course, is one of the, if not the major gateway city into those countries. So being able to fly through Bangkok to either Siem Reap or Van Bien or Luang Prabang is quite important.
Yeah, currently they still haven't opened up all the internal flights. So the best way of getting into Cambodia is via Singapore. Singapore Airlines into Phnom Penh. That's a really efficient route. I've had people use it. We had a very famous historian travel with us to Cambodia very recently, and he just went straight through from Singapore to Phnom Penh, and then was out, and him and his guide explored the Angkor Wat, basically just the 2 of them at times, which is amazing for a historian to have that basically, just insight all on his own.
Yeah.
And yeah. So it's definitely doable, definitely possible. And again, the fact that you don't just start in Siem Reap and end in Siem Reap is a fantastic opportunity to explore the rest of the country. And fingers crossed, Laos can follow suit very soon.
So Mark, you're due out there, I think, on Friday, provided Royal Mail get your passport back to you. I know it's been a little bit more challenging getting into Laos than it has been for Nathan to Thailand, but we're optimistic that the rules there are going to be relaxed fairly shortly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my issues are I'm not going back as a tourist. In fact, it's easier to go back as a tourist than it is a returning expat. So yeah, so my trip back has been, has become more difficult because of, and it's also linked to our status, our agreement with the government with Lone Buffalo. So it's all, yeah, it's very difficult. That's why it's been difficult for me. Whereas for tourists, I believe, like working with Rob, our agent there, obviously that I think they can get the paperwork through Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that's taken me 8 weeks, can be done in a matter of 3 or 4 days, and the Lao Embassy, who are brilliant in London, can process in a day. So almost within a week, you can get your paperwork done through Lao, and that will be to go anytime in the next couple of months. And we've got a green zone type thing, which is, I guess, similar to the sandbox thing that's going on there, but that's all sort of opening out very quickly. A lot of changes have happened in the last week or so with like quarantine for myself, which was still in place as an expat. That's sort of gone down to 48 hours. Yeah, so things are moving really quickly, and there seems to be a real push from the government to get things out. There's an acceptance now, of COVID, like, you don't have to go to hospital because you've got COVID now, you can stay at home. So things have changed really quickly, especially in the last sort of month or so. So I'm anticipating, by the summer, as you've mentioned, to be welcoming tourists back. And certainly, the tours in October, I'm hoping that, and I'm thinking that they're going to run pretty much as we've done for the past 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. I think it'll snowball, and when the changes happen, that it'll be quite fast. I've got a question here that is written by Viv, but could just as easily have been written by my wife. For someone who is the favorite feast of mosquitoes, when would be the best time to go, or does it make no difference? I think that was in terms of Laos. I'm sure it's pretty similar for Cambodia. Mark, do you want to answer that?
Well, you know what, I can't remember the last time I was bitten, and it's strange. I think if you wear some protection when we go for walks in the through the jungle and stuff like that, then you would do that, or when we're staying beside the river. But I don't really think it's a real hotbed, and certainly from my experience with clients, it's not really a hotbed for mosquitoes, as long as you cover up and you take someone that's a magnet for mosquitoes is obviously going to have their own systems to protect themselves. And I don't think it's any different from anywhere else. It's not an issue that I'm ever really faced with, to be quite honest.
Viv, one thing I can say, my wife, and I don't get commission from this, is Craghopper's Nosy Life range of clothing, which my wife pretty much lives in. Which is really good and does work. I'm not as bad as my wife, but I do get bitten quite a lot. So I have some Nosy Life shirts and trousers, and they don't look really awful, and they do kind of work. So that's a good thing to use, as well as your kind of mosquito repellent and stuff. Nathan, I've been in Cambodia enough. It's much the same as what Mark says, isn't it? You've got to be a bit careful, but there's no great issue there.
No, it's just dusk and dawn. You just got to be careful of. So you're aware of it during the day, you're going to be absolutely fine. Dusk and dawn, get some tiger balm, help soothe it, smells lovely. And you should be okay. Siem Reap doesn't really have a problem in the slightest when you're in the temples or anything like that. It's only if you're going to travel down the Mekong Delta region from like Phnom Penh down to Ho Chi Minh, then you might be a bit more cautious there. Or if you're doing a sunset cruise on Tonle Sap, by all means, make sure you're covering up for sunset. But otherwise, not really a big issue.
Oh, very good. I've got a question here from Julie. I'm going to try and pronounce it properly. Luang Prabang is my happy place. I know what you mean, Julie. I got north to Nong Khai, is it? K-H?
Nong Kyo.
Nong Kyo, sorry, and wondered if it's easier to get further north. I like learning about the hill tribe ethnic groups and would love to visit. That's for you, I guess, Mark.
Yeah, no, I mean, as I say, bearing in mind what I said earlier on about, you know, the country opening up gradually, certainly those areas further north, except Pong Sa Lia is one of my favorite little spots there, which is close to the Chinese border, really ethnically diverse, and some of the, like the Akha and some of the tribes that really only inherit that very northernmost part of, or inhabit, sorry, that very northernmost part of Laos. Udom Sai, which is over a little bit further to the west, that's another great place where you can get to fairly easy. There's actually some really good accommodation there. Muang La, which was the resort I showed you with the spa running through it, you can trek quite close to there. In fact, there's a really nice Muchi village, which is where the photograph that you saw of my clients there. That's a proper off the beaten track experience with absolutely zero sort of Western comfort. So yeah, I mean, all those places are easy to get to. Certainly, you know, with a local guide and some transport, you know, we can get you pretty much anywhere you want to go in that further north of Luang Prabang. So yeah, that would be and fantastic experience and trips too.
Mark, I had a question for you. Plainer jars.
Yes.
What period is it, and what were their purpose?
Oh, okay, so 1500 to 2000 year old burial jars, basically. I mean, pretty much all the research. Madame Colony was the French anthropologist who came in the 30s, and she until very recently she'd done the only study of any of the monuments in Laos. But she basically concluded that they were used for funerary purposes.
Okay.
You can actually see, I mean, the University of Australia uncovered some actual bones, which was quite exciting for us a couple of years back. And I think either the bodies were actually put inside the jars, or maybe they were buried next to the jars. Yeah, so it's all part of a funeral sort of ritual.
Great. Thank you very much. Last question here from Celia Cox. I went some years ago to the Russian market. Is it still there? I think that's for Cambodia, and I'm therefore assuming it's for Nathan. Is that Siem Reap?
Yeah, there's still the Russian kind of market area that you can visit. Yeah, and it's still very much in its traditional standpoint. It's worth going to.
Good. Well, we had a great evening, didn't we, Nathan, going around doing the evening street market food and everything with Nala and what have you, which was great fun.
Yeah, although we didn't eat any tarantulas on that occasion, Johnny.
Not on that occasion. Okay, guys, listen, Mark, thank you so much for your input today. I hope you do get your passport back on Friday and head off down to Laos. Nathan, thank you so much. We'll let you head off to bed. I suspect it's probably getting close to 10, 11 o'clock, isn't it, where you are?
I've still got a couple of hours of work.